there are many studies and studies to back up every opinion, right? That's true. You can find a study to back up almost any view, but that doesn't mean that the science is unclear. It doesn't mean that the experts are confused. What it means is that we don't derive overarching scientific conclusions from individual studies. We look at totality of evidence. This is a crucial mindset shift. So when you look at the totality of the evidence, you see that neither of the artificially polarized opinions on meat is evidence-based. You'll hear people saying red meat is toxic. Doesn't matter how much. It doesn't matter what else you're eating. If you're eating any red meat, you're damaging your health. And you also see people saying this is all vegan propaganda and red meat is just a health food, period. No matter how much you eat, no matter what else you're doing, it's good for you, or at least neutral for you. Neither of those positions is really can be justified based on the evidence. What we see fairly consistently is that there is a threshold of effect, particularly with CVD and with cancer, with colorectal cancer. And that threshold seems to be around 100 grams per day average consumption, average intake. So usually when you look at studies comparing people, say, eating 20 grams a day average to people eating 60 grams a day, you don't see much difference there. You see this, for example, with studies from Asia, from Japan, right? And so when people look at this and go, see, in this study, the people that ate the most red meat didn't have more disease. So this whole story is just a lie. You have to look at the details, right? You have to look at how the different pieces of information fit together. Okay, that's a study looking at low, very low compared to a bit less low consumption. Then you look at studies that cross that threshold, say people consuming 50 grams a day average to people consuming 150 grams a day average. And there you tend to see the difference in outcomes with a higher rate of CVD and a higher rate of colorectal cancer with the highest intake.
That's such an important point, is if we're talking about a certain food or an exposure, what is the contrast in that study between the two groups? Because as you're speaking to here, if that contrast is not sufficient, because high and low can mean many different things in different studies, right? It's relative. They're relative to one another. And you spoke earlier about cigarettes, but just to kind of use that as another example here, that would be like perhaps looking at a population of smokers and comparing those who smoke 7 cigarettes a day to 9. And if you didn't find a significant difference, you may, from that study, if you're not looking at the totality of the evidence, you may be inclined to think that smoking is not increasing risk.
Right. And when you look at things with that information in mind, you realize that studies that are seemingly contradictory really aren't. There is no contradiction, right?
They're just different studies.
The fact that you find exceptions doesn't mean the thing doesn't work. It's because we have this tendency of oversimplifying into all or nothing, black and white. And the effect in our minds, the effect is supposed to be linear. The more you eat, the higher the rate of disease. And sometimes you see that, but sometimes you don't. With cholesterol, that's another common one, right? It's a plateau at a fairly low range. And so that confuses a lot.
Dietary cholesterol.
Yeah, dietary cholesterol. Does eating cholesterol raise your serum cholesterol or not? People can't get a straight answer. People are pulling their hair out over this because the effect isn't linear. It's extremely confusing. But once you show somebody the graph once, that there's a linear phase and then there's a plateau. And so if you're looking at the phase of the plateau, you can vary the dietary cholesterol all you want. You're going to see very little difference in serum levels. And if you're in the linear range, the opposite happens, right? So the key here is not to know all these facts by heart. The key is just to realize that when you step back and you look at the full picture, things that are seemingly contradictory a lot of times are not. And in fact, they show you how things work. They are different pieces of the puzzle that fit together to show you the full picture.